Welcome to Betrayal Trauma Recovery. This is Anne. The holiday season is filled with hope for so many of us. Unfortunately, at btrorg, over the years, we've heard thousands of horror stories of women planning for beautiful family memories during this time, only to be traumatized by discoveries of their husband's porn use or their affair, or to be a victim of a psychological or emotional abuse episode, or find out that they've been being psychologically or emotionally abused for years. So if you need support during this season, we're here for you. You can find all of our services at btrorg. Before we get to today's episode, there are a lot of so-called betrayal trauma therapists or coaches or groups out there. One woman knew she needed help after listening to our podcast, but instead of coming to our website, btr.org, and joining our online group or scheduling an individual session with our coaches, she Googled the term betrayal trauma and found a so-called betrayal trauma coach elsewhere. She didn't realize the difference between the coaches here at btr.org and a generic so-called betrayal trauma expert. And even though the coach claimed to understand betrayal trauma, she had a terrible experience. After trying to help this so-called expert understand her situation over several sessions, she thought, why am I paying to educate this person? I need help. A lot of so-called professionals throw around the phrase betrayal trauma, but they don't actually know how to help women in session. Some of them do great online presentations or YouTube videos, but once you get in session, you realize they're not helpful. Here at Betrayal Trauma Recovery, btr.org, we know how to actually help you. Our Betrayal Trauma Recovery group, called BTRG for short, is a daily online support group. So when I say join Betrayal Trauma Recovery group, I'm not talking about just any betrayal support group out there. I'm talking about our group, the one we run, that's only available through btr.org. Our clinical director, Coach Joy, and I personally train every coach at BTR. Not that they need much training. They've already had a lifetime of experience and training before they even come to us, but our training ensures that when women schedule sessions or join our group, they have a safe and validating experience from the very first session. Our group sessions are intended to help victims of emotional and psychological abuse and sexual coercion. If you're experiencing physical assault or sexual assault of any kind, or you know your husband is committing a crime, rather than joining group, schedule an individual session with Coach Renee so she can help you navigate your local resources. But if you're like a majority of our clients, you're experiencing trauma caused by your husband's sexual coercion in the form of porn use, infidelity, and also emotional and psychological abuse in the forms of gaslighting, manipulation, lying, you know the drill. You're experiencing the type of abuse that's invisible and difficult to wrap your head around. Here at BTR, you don't have to convince our coaches that you need help. They'll outline a clear path to safety without you having to educate them, because they're here to help you. Our daily online support group has more sessions than any other support group out there. We have over 21 sessions per week for you to choose from. You don't have to wait for an appointment. You don't have to leave your home. You can join from your closet or your parked car in your garage. We're here for you. Check out the session schedule at btr.org, and we'd love to see you in a session today. For everyone who has given this podcast a 5-star rating on Apple Podcasts or any other podcasting app, thank you so much. If this podcast has helped you, when you rate it, you help other women find it. So your ratings and reviews make a big difference for victims desperately trying to figure out what is happening to them. Here's one of the 5-star reviews that we received on Apple Podcasts. It says, this podcast is a grounding resource. I had stumbled across BTR in the chaos and fog after discovery. I was hesitant at first, unsure if online support was for me. When I finally booked a session with Coach Joy, it was life-changing. In one session, she gave me resources and helped me put words to what I had been experiencing: abuse. I later met with Coach Deborah once I knew I was preparing for divorce. She helped me make sense of the financials and legal jargon. Anne's podcast and BTR posts have kept me going, keeping me grounded in my reality, helping me know I'm not alone. I only regret not diving in sooner when I was trying to make sense of it all. Safety should have been my initial priority. No matter what your spiritual background or where you are in the mess that is betrayal, this is a must-have on your list of self-care resources. Thank you so much for that review. Each one of these reviews on Apple Podcasts helps isolated women find us. Similarly, if we say something today that really strikes you or you have a similar experience, please go to our website, btr.org, find this podcast episode and comment. We'd love to hear your stories. I have Tom Pride from Psalm 82 Initiative back on today's podcast. I have had him on the podcast before. He is amazing, and I am so grateful for the work that he does. I'm grateful for his help and for everything that he does for victims. So, welcome back, Tom.
Thank you, and it's great to be back.
I received in the mail this awesome coin that I wanted Tom to come on the podcast to talk about. And I am so proud of this. When I received it in the mail, I'm going to have him describe it, but just emotionally speaking, I cannot say enough about it. It feels good, like the weight of it and the words, it really holds a special place in my heart. And I'm not an object person, but this really means a lot to me. So, Tom, can you talk about the coin that you guys created at Psalm 82 Initiative?
We wanted a coin for people who come here to visit us at the refuge, who had been through the training in some way or who's been a client of ours, and we wanted something to be able to give to them to say, good job. You finished. So, for instance, with the training program, we did a conference here at the refuge, and this is what we gave at the end of it when they went through all of that first introductory conference to the 4 tools that we teach. We wanted something substantial that was meaningful, like you said, because you take a certificate, you get a certificate, and it's not like you're going to load your walls with all kinds of certificates. It just goes in a file somewhere, and I wanted something that you could put in your pocket, but that would have the entire conference and the entire basic principles on a single coin. And so that's what it is.
My favorite part is really big letters on one side. It says, "I will not comply," which is just so telling, and I love it. And we have talked about the 4 tools on a previous episode. We'll put that in the show notes so that if you haven't heard that episode before, you can go listen to that one and then join us back here. Compliance is one thing that is required for abuse. So, can you talk about the compliance issue and why you thought it was so important to write in really big letters, "I will not comply"?
So we call this the freedom coin. The only way to be free from abuse is to not play the game. The 4 tools, 4 elements, of the 8 of those things, there's only one that is actually in the control of the victim, and that is their compliance. And so withholding their compliance from the abuser, saying, no, I'm not going to put up with the isolation. I'm not going to put up with the intimidation. I'm not going to respect your entitlement. I'm not going to be controlled. I'm not going to be coerced anymore. That spirit of I will not comply is essential to breaking the abusive pattern. It's one of the reasons why, as an advocate, my job is to make that as safe as is humanly possible, to help someone do that and have that view, but only with a sense of safety. How to do it in a way that's not going to increase their risk, or at least unnecessarily so.
One of the things that I think, at least listeners to this podcast, the type of abuse that they experience a lot is gaslighting. Complying with gaslighting is like thinking, well, am I the crazy one? Or do I really have the problem? Or maybe this is just me. Maybe it isn't a big deal. Part of not complying in the face of gaslighting would be really going with your gut, like trusting yourself and being willing to say, even though he's telling me this, it just doesn't feel right or it doesn't seem right. What are your thoughts about victims not complying with gaslighting?
With gaslighting, the way to combat manipulation is with truth. And truth is just simply being honest with myself about myself, my situation. So, part when you say go with your gut, the way I would refer to that is more if you are feeling something, that you be honest with yourself about that feeling. Something in this feels wrong. I'm confused. There's something going on here that doesn't make sense. This doesn't feel true, and I need to figure that out. The best way to not comply is to grab hold of what is true, hang on to it for all you're worth. Because the key to gaslighting is that it makes you doubt what is true, makes you doubt what is real. If an abuser can actually accomplish that, then they can do whatever they want, and you don't believe your own eyes. If they can get you to the point where you don't even trust your own perception, then they have successfully undermined your own ability to even deal with the abuse. So refusing to comply with that kind of manipulation just says, no, I know what happened to me. I know how it happened. I know that you did it. And that's just the truth. And it's that clinging to truth, which is going to be the refusal to comply.
If our listeners take anything, is that manipulation is an abuse tactic, and it is possible to not comply with that in that way, because so much of the abuse that our listeners experience is this covert sort of non-aggressive but sneaky manipulative types of abuse rather than the overt stuff that's really obvious.
And one of the things that happens with that covert manipulative kind of abuse tactic is that the victim gets in the habit of managing the abuser. That requires a suspense of what is true of the situation for them. In that process of trying to manage the abuser, one of the things that's very handy is to say, that's not going to be what I'm going to do anymore. I'm not managing that. This is what's true, and I'm not going past that. The only thing I would say in that regard is when you actually put that wall that says, no, this is true. What you're saying is not true. And I am not going to be going down that road with you. That can be a escalating event. And so you do want to be very cautious and make sure that whatever decisions you're making, you're doing from a position of safety so that you're not putting yourself in harm's way in the process.
I'm going to take a break here for just a second to talk about my book, Trauma Mama Husband Drama. You can find it on our books page, btr.org/books. That books page also has a curated list of all of the books that we recommend. My book, Trauma Mama Husband Drama, is a picture book for adults, so it is the easiest way for you to explain what's going on to someone who might not understand it. It's also just a good reference for yourself because it shows what's happening with very telling and emotional illustrations, as well as infographics at the back. When you go to our books page and click on any of those books, it just takes you directly to Amazon and you can throw those books in your cart. After you have purchased the book, please remember to circle back around to Amazon and write a verified purchase review along with a 5-star rating. That helps isolated women find us. It bumps Trauma Mama Husband Drama up in the Amazon algorithm, and even if women don't purchase the book, it helps them find this podcast, which is free to everyone. Here is a 5-star review we received on Amazon. Spot on, I'm not alone, I am not naive. Perfect book to validate and explain. I wish this book was available when I was struggling. I'm beyond that point now, but I am committed to supporting those traumatized, unsupported, and alone. There's help and understanding available. You weren't meant to suffer. Thank you so much for leaving that review. Again, every single review on Amazon helps isolated women find us. And even if they don't buy the book, the Amazon algorithm can help them find this podcast, which is free to everyone. I so appreciate those of you who share these podcast episodes on Facebook or tag us on Instagram, comment on our YouTube channel. Anytime you interact with us online, it really helps other isolated women find us. And now back to the conversation. One of the things that impresses me about abuse victims, and I think other people or people who don't understand abuse would perhaps see this maybe as a weakness, but for me, I think it's a strength and it impresses me so much, is that I have never met an abuse victim who is not willing to do some self-reflection. In fact, they're so willing to do it, and there's this level of humility and a level of willingness to take responsibility that I find in abuse victims that actually makes them susceptible to abuse because they're so willing to take responsibility, which I see as a strength. Can we talk about that for a minute? A victim's willingness to say, well, maybe what he's saying is true. Maybe I do need to cook a better dinner. Or maybe I do need to work out more. Or maybe I do need to read the Bible more. Or maybe I do need to submit more or something like that. What would you say to women who are having a hard time ferreting out what is true because they really genuinely want to know the truth and they're wondering if what their abuser is saying about them is true.
And that's a tough one. Most of the ways that we can filter out truth is in terms of our personal experience. But when we're talking about something that is a perception based idea, that becomes much more difficult. Well, maybe I'm perceiving it wrong, maybe this or maybe that. That's where we really need to also look at isolation and how isolation plays a part in the ability to manipulate. So if I'm talking to my friend and I'm saying, hey, this happened and someone said this to me, my friend can say, "Oh, that's nuts." And now I have a check on my perception that says, oh, my perception might be actually more accurate than I thought. It's in community and it's in those kinds of healthy relationships where we have those checks and balances on what's happening to me. But a lot of times we get this secrecy, this extreme privacy or loyalty where we don't actually talk to people about what's happening, and we're not willing to speak to others about that and speak truthfully about it, or we don't know that we can. We don't have anybody that can kind of be a sanity check. One of the most valuable gifts that I can give to someone is the truth. And so when someone calls me, one of the things that we talk about is that my job is to speak back to you what is true about the situation that you've brought to me. So the Bible says, buy the truth, sell it not. It is a priceless commodity, the truth. And so when you find relationships where someone can actually speak truthfully about your situation back to you, here's what that looks like, here's what that says. And then even just reframing something that the abuser says. And so, well, that just sounds like this. And then it's like, oh, yeah. Ugh. And it's that reframing of a particular manipulative tactic in a thing that's more true. And when that truth is then set starkly, which is what relationships do, it's what good friends can do, it's what a therapist can do, even a support group, those kinds of resources are valuable in terms of checking that and finding out, am I out in left field here? So we always got to kind of leave the possibility, well, maybe I am in left field. That's part of our ability to see the truth. And that kind of humility is a good trait that allows me to consider truth. But then I also need to be able to validate the information coming in, uh, so that I'm making sure that what is true or what I'm taking as true actually is.
Yeah, I just want to say of our listeners, like, I'm proud of you for having that, like, maybe this is true feeling. And I don't want anyone to be like, well, it's your fault that you were gaslit or whatever, because that strength that you have of being humble or being willing to look at yourself is a really good quality. In the case of abuse, unfortunately, abusers use that against their victims, but it doesn't mean that that trait isn't awesome.
Let me say this as well. That idea of truth and living in truth, that's not as easy as it sounds. Sometimes we can get overly simplistic about our notion of true. And so we don't allow ourselves to say something like, I don't know. So just because I'm conflicted doesn't mean I have to pick which emotion is true. I can just simply say, I don't know. These two are what I'm experiencing. The truthfulness with myself about myself is something that is much harder to achieve than it seems because our perceptions are funny about that. And so that humility is actually an essential trait to being able to evaluate that. But when the truth is valuable to me, when that is the thing that I'm holding on to, manipulation is much harder to achieve.
I love what you said about community. And that's one of the things at Betrayal Trauma Recovery that we really, really value and that we've tried to create is an online community where we have multiple group sessions a day where women can come and get feedback from each other to say, is this really what's happening? Is this really what's going on? I think that's really important. And I have one other thought about that, and it is that sometimes it's true, but the way that we're interpreting it isn't true. So, for example, someone might say, well, you're so angry, for example, and that is true. You are angry. But the implied thing is there's something wrong with the anger. And the truth is, the anger is awesome and you should feel angry for being abused, and the anger can help you. And so the lie in that might be that something is wrong with your anger. instead of that you're not angry or not. And so I think that that's an important thing to look at too when we're thinking about truth, is that the thing might be true, but the way you're interpreting it might not be true.
And most of the time, when something's true like that, what we want to do is we want to instinctively be defensive. Like, no, 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 I'm not angry. Instead, you should press into it. Say, well, yes, I am angry. Here's why.
Exactly. Your anger is welcome here at BTR, and it's also welcome at Psalm 82 initiative, right? Because your anger is justified in this situation.
Yeah, so anger is just an emotion. It's like the idiot light on your car. It says something, your oil light comes on. That means you better turn off your car and put some oil in it because that's bad. You need oil in your engine. What happens is we see something like anger, it's an emotion, it indicates, hey, there's a problem. Anger is just an indicator. There's something wrong. And now that something wrong might be something that isn't wrong, that I think is wrong. It may be my perception one way or the other. I can be angry because I stubbed my toe and it's just, there's no real reason to be angry. It's just, I stubbed my toe. But there's also anger where someone has done something hurtful and there's something wrong. And a lot of times what happens with anger in particular is we try to do things like tape it over. So if you're driving your car down the road, the oil light comes on, you get out a little piece of tape and you put it over the oil light so you can't see it anymore. That is not going to help you when your engine gives up the ghost another 10 miles down the road. You can't just simply cover it up and pretend it doesn't exist without it having really bad effects on you personally. There's certain things you have to do. But and the other thing that happens is when anger comes up, we get out of the car. It's like the oil light comes on. I say, oh no, my car's broken. I need to pull over. So pull over on the side of the road. And then I let the air out of all my tires. And I get back on the road and I start driving again. Well, the oil light says something specific. If I get out and do something random, that's not going to fix the problem. I have to actually fix the problem. And so identifying the problem accurately and truthfully is an essential part of actually dealing with what's at the root of this anger. Why do I feel this way? And then is there something that I need to do to stop what's happening? Can I get help? How do I respond? The problem comes when we retaliate out of anger. That never works out well.
So, on the side of the coin that says, I will not comply, which is my favorite part, you also include the 4 elements of abuse and the 4 tools. And we talked about these in a previous episode that I've referred to a lot. So, again, if you haven't heard that yet, it'll be in the show notes and you can go back and listen to that first. I love that everything is included on this side. And in order to earn this coin, which I earned from working with Tom, there's another side of the coin, which has an image of a burning chair, which is a metaphor. And one of the ways that you can earn this coin is to have your own burning chair moment. So, Tom, can you talk about the woman who inspired this metaphor?
So we had someone come and stay at the refuge. And one of the things we encourage is for people to have some kind of a moment or some kind of a gesture, some event in their life that is a symbol of freedom for them. And it'll be painting a room or redoing a floor or changing a picture or give me any number of things, but it's really symbolic of the control and it's undoing some symbol of control that exists in the victim's life. And so we had somebody come and they talked about a chair that was kind of that symbol of control for them. And I just kind of made an offhand comment. I said, well, you ought to go home and burn it. They were like, oh no, I could never do that. And about 2 weeks later, I got a text message from this person and they sent me a video of the chair on a bonfire burning. And it just made me so happy. And I thought, what a great image. And we were designing the coin at the time. And I thought that has to be the center of this side of the freedom coin. It is a symbol of personal freedom, breaking that control, just in terms of a symbolic break that takes place. And the truth is that every abuse victim is going to have at least one, and sometimes multiple variations on it. There's a lot of chairs that get burned when you're dealing with abuse, and sometimes it's a whole series of them, one right after another. But it's just the burning throne, just as kind of a symbol of saying, I'm breaking free of abuse. And so for those people that we work with who have had that burning chair moment, we send them a coin that is their freedom coin. And so that's what this is.
So I've had a few. One I actually experienced while working with Tom, but I will tell one that happened before I ever met Tom. And that was when I bought this home with my ex-husband. I did not like it. The whole plan was to remodel it. And after he was arrested, I felt stuck because I felt like I can't do anything. I don't have the money, I don't have the time, I don't have the know-how to do this remodeling. And I felt really stuck because I wouldn't have bought this home thinking I wasn't going to remodel it, if that makes any sense. Like it wasn't working the way that it was. And so the plan was always to remodel it. So for years, I just felt stuck and felt frustrated and felt like he was controlling my destiny, sort of, that I couldn't live the life that I wanted to because of the situation that he had put me in. And my brother was doing some stuff around his home, and he had this workman that was working at his house who was charging $20 an hour for demolition. And I called him and I said, "Hey, I want this wall to come down. See if I can just do that one thing." Called him and he said, "Yeah, I can come over like in a couple days." It was really quick. And I was surprised. I was like, "Oh, okay." I thought it would take all day. I thought it would, at the very least cost me like $1,000 or something to get this wall down. And that was super expensive. And I didn't really know if it was going to work out. And he came over at 9 in the morning and that wall was completely down by noon. It cost me $60 was all. And it was such a moment where it was like, I can move on. I can move forward. I can live the life that I want. Like tearing down that wall, even though I didn't physically do it, the workman came and did it, was so like, whoa. And then all kinds of things started, I would say, coming down, mental walls and other walls that I have. And so it wasn't just a physical thing for me. It was also just this huge emotional rush of like, I can work toward the life that I always wanted, in spite of the fact that I'm an abuse victim, and in spite of the fact that I still have to deal with my ex-husband all the time. We're going to pause the conversation here, but join me again next week when Tom and I talk. Next week, we're going to have a discussion about biblical submission and how he sees it. He's a pastor. You will not want to miss it. So stay tuned for next week. If this podcast is helpful to you, please support it. Go to our website, btr.org, scroll down to the bottom and click on Support the Podcast. And until next week, stay safe out there.